Good evening. Welcome to Aging with Attitude. My name is Alan Levin, and our guest this evening is Becky Keenan. She is a founder and president of Network Legal. Welcome to Aging with Attitude, Becky.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being here.
You're right. It kind of speaks for itself, but tell us anyway, what does Network Legal do?
Basically, we are an estate planning firm, and we work with everything that has to do with end of life, from the planning to the document preparation to helping people settle the estates, and working with caregivers and end of life issues too.
That sounds pretty important. I would guess, a lot of people, including me occasionally, sometimes worry about what's going to happen and how to leave property to the next generation, and it all seems very complicated and threatening and forbidding, but I guess that's what you people are in business to handle.
We do. We try to take things that are complicated and make them easy to understand.
Yeah, I understand that. I think we all have a general idea of what estate planning is, but let's hear it from a professional. What is encompassed by estate planning?
Well, the biggest thing is it doesn't just start with assets and who you're leaving things to. And it really starts with people, who a person is, and who a family will become. And it really is about what your attitude is about life and death, and what your goals are for your family, and what you want for your family, and what your what you want to happen in the event that you pass away. So it really starts with communication. It starts with actually talking to your family, and that's very difficult to do because for a lot of people it's too emotional, and so they don't even ask any questions.
Right. You don't want to bring it up to mom or dad, you don't want to be, you don't want to upset them or anything like that, and you don't want them to be thinking that that's all you're focused on is, getting some of what they have or all of what they have.
Well, and that's what most people think, and unfortunately, it's so much more than that, and you really have to look at it as a financial planning, part of financial planning, because it has to do with whether there's going to be enough money for long-term care, and what type of lifestyle will they be able to have? What is their attitude about as far as quality of life is concerned? Do they even have the legal documents as far as their caregivers, and do their family members have the legal documents to even make decisions for them? So it's so much more than what you're going to get and who's
what you're
going to
give. Yeah, I can certainly see that now. I can imagine an awful lot of mistakes that people would make, either in not doing anywhere near enough, or even in doing things that happen to be the wrong things. Ill-considered, hasty judgments. I can see a lot of mistakes that people would make. I see you've been in business for 25 years, which is a good long time.
It is.
And my guess is you've probably seen an awful lot of mistakes that people make in this area. Yeah.
I have.
Yeah, maybe any good horror stories you can tell us about that?
Well, the way to kind of see the big picture is 75% of adults in the United States don't even have an estate plan. And of the people that do, they say 90% of those estate plans fail in some way.
Oh, I see.
So you can imagine they fail in that maybe they are documents that they never had updated, maybe documents from another state. They changed their mind. Family members, stop talking, divorce, all the different things that happen. But normally, what ends up happening, and what kind of moved me to start doing executor support services, is I would start having clients that would come in after a family member had passed away, and they would show up to my office with paper bags just full of papers and wicker baskets full of stuff. You know how you always have that corner in your kitchen with all that paperwork that is from bills and coupons and suckers and birthday cards and all that stuff that you're going to organize one of these days. Well, in the event someone passes away, someone has to scoop all that up and start filtering through that, and that's how most executors start, because most people have not organized enough enough, or they haven't talked, so no one really knows where things are.
Right.
With the computers now, most people don't even have passwords to be able to get into their online
computer,
accounts.
let's say, yeah.
Absolutely. But probably the most difficult situation I ever had was a mother who was a single mom who passed away. She was in a terrible car accident, and this was maybe 7 or 8 years ago. She had a 17-year-old daughter, and the daughter did very, very well with the whole incident, but when she finally came into my office to talk with me about what her mom had done to prepare in the event of a death, the one thing she asked, and the first thing she asked was, what did my mom say? What did she say about me? What did she talk about? And it really impressed upon me how important it is for family members to have something more in writing than just plugging in some names in a document. You've got these statute documents that you plug in a name to give them the legal right to make decisions for you, but they don't know what decisions that they need to be making. And so it's an awfully cold set of documents to be looking at when you haven't communicated and you don't know what your family member wanted and their ideas of life and death and that sort of thing. And so here was the 17-year-old young lady that really just wanted more than what she saw in the will.
Gee, that is so interesting. That never would have dawned on me that somebody would want that, but I guess it makes perfect sense.
Well, it's difficult, and I do a lot of educational programs in corporations, and so I'll have 25, 30 people in these programs, and I'll talk about leaving letters of instruction, leaving letters, love letters, just so that your family knows what you're thinking. And the one question that someone in every one of these programs will ask, they'll say, well, do you have a template? Do you have something to get us started? Because just taking a blank piece of paper and start writing your wishes out is very difficult to do.
Sure.
So I think that's interesting that the most important conversation that people need to have is the most difficult decision.
Yeah, sure. You mentioned executor support services. Tell us about that.
Well, like I said, I have helped a lot of people in getting their estates prepared and organized and making plans for end-of-life issues. But what started happening is family members or executors would call me in the event of one of my clients passing, and they wouldn't have any idea where to begin. And in a lot of cases, they were exhausted. They were emotionally drained from being a caregiver. They were exhausted just from experiencing a loved one passing. And then they were all of a sudden facing all this administrative work that most people don't like anyway. And in so many cases, the loved one wasn't organized. They hadn't talked. They couldn't find the documents. They didn't know where anything was. And so they would show up, like I said, to my office with wicker baskets full of things, and just even to fill out one form with maybe 2 or 3 questions on it. I would have executives of corporations that couldn't even get their thoughts together to do that because you're depressed, and it's just difficult. And so what we would do at our office is we would clean up all the paperwork, get everything organized in a little expandable folder, and point them in the direction of an attorney or point them in the direction of the courthouse if they wanted to do it themselves. And that seemed to help an awful lot. And then they started making phone calls, asking other questions. And so we were helping a lot of people and decided to formulate this into part of our services. And so now what we do is we do a full service executor support. So you can use this as much or as little. If you just need someone to make a phone call to because you can't find the directions or understand the directions of something, to maybe you live in California and you have 3 days of bereavement and you've got to get back to work and you don't ever want to be back here in Charlotte again. And so we have that spectrum of clients that we work with. And so we have through the years been able to pull a team of people together, from attorneys to CPAs to financial planners to realtors to appraisers. So anyone that someone would need in settling an estate, and all estates are different. There's not one that's alike. So we sort of have done the due diligence and can pull our team of people together. So it's one phone call and you sort of have a home base. So there are many people who have been through this before and they feel like they can do it. They just need a little bit of help, and then there are people who need a lot of help and something in between. So it's a way to save money, because we all are trying to do things ourselves, and the internet is telling us we can do everything ourselves, but there's a lot more to it than that.
You know, I'm just thinking also, you've got the survivor has to do all this after just recovering from the funeral and dealing with the funeral service, not to mention the trauma of the funeral itself and all the relatives and everything, and you're kind of drained anyway, and you just feel like you want to run away from all this for about a week. And now all of a sudden you're confronted with this. Well, Mom has this safe deposit box in this bank and with this stuff and blah, 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 and you gotta, so yeah, you really need something like that to help you. Boy, that is rough to go through at that particular time. It's rough to go through any time, but especially at that time after you've just gone through the final arrangements, as they say.
Exactly, and what most people don't realize is that settling an estate is much more than just having a will and doing what the will says. Because not everything and not all assets go through the will. So it really depends on how you have your ownership and how you have your beneficiaries set. So you could have assets that will go through the will. You could have assets that go through a trust. You have beneficiary designations on some assets.
Right.
You might own a piece of property joint with rights of survivorship. So you know, all these assets will pass to the beneficiaries in different ways.
Oh, I see.
And each account that they have has a different way of settling things. So there's not one formulated way that everyone goes by. So it becomes very difficult in trying to figure out who you need to talk with and what that particular company is going to need from you to settle this estate.
Yeah.
A lot of administrative work.
Yeah. You know what, I was just thinking, I don't know practically how you would do it, but it would be nice if there was some kind of a form, obviously like a multi-page form, that older people would get, in which they would list assets, list everything and where it is and how to get to it and everything, and just keep this memo pad, whatever it is, this book, somewhere where Junior or the daughter or whoever can get a hold of it and instantly know what. I was thinking in connection with something else that I was talking with somebody else about, you know, the horrors of losing your wallet. And one of the horrors is all these ID cards, not to mention credit cards that you have in there, your ATM card. And one good thing I did do is I sat down at the computer and I opened up a window and I entered every single ID card and credit card I had on my wallet and the telephone number and where to go to cancel. So I felt good. At least I did something constructive. I was saying something like that would be good if a custom could be established, which might not be easy, to get older people who can see the end coming, to be able to put all this stuff down rather than leave it to Junior to try to figure out, you know, the last minute in the middle of all the funeral preparations and everything else.
That's a very important step of estate planning, and you don't have to be an old person to need to be doing that.
Yeah, good thought.
You at any age that you need to have those instructions, where you can find all of that. Even for younger people who still have maybe a 401k at a company that they worked with 10 years ago.
Right.
Where do you find those things? So absolutely, it is just to take the burden off of family members, because they have most of the time have never done this, or maybe they did it one time. Other than that, there's no training for it. So you're really stuck in the middle of a lot of work, not knowing. And like I said, with the internet, and you said you went onto your computer. Well, what happens if you had a password on that computer? And what happens if you had some software? And there are places that you can go and itemize all those, and you can get onto Shutterfly and some of these places where you can put your pictures and all sorts of information. But then if your family doesn't know you ever did it, and if you can't find that. So that's why and also keeping it updated. It's a great idea, but will you do it again in 6 months, or will you do it again in another year, because things change so quickly?
Right, absolutely, yeah. It'd be good. You'd have a lot of attitudinal obstacles to overcome with that. A lot of older people, in my experience, don't want to talk about this. It's unpleasant. I'm sure you've run into that. And it's awkward and difficult for Junior to bring it up to Mom or Dad.
It is, and one of the things that we help young adults and or the kids of an older parent is to really help them in how to have that conversation and how to have that communication and ways of really interpreting maybe the silence. And so that's one of the programs that we have corporations is really to teach that communication. And it's very important.
That is good to do. Now tell me, I've heard this term all of my life, and I sort of think I know what it is, but what exactly is probate?
Well, probate is proving the will. It basically is validating that there is an actual legal document, that it was signed and it was signed correctly.
Right.
And then the process of probate is really the court supervising the executor and settling the estate.
I see. Okay.
Which entails a lot, because if they have to supervise it, they have to know everything that's going on, so everything has to be documented. And so there's a lot of information that has to go back and forth to the courthouse, and the inventories, and there's a cost to it. There's probate fees and court cost, and a lot of cases people will hire an attorney to help with it. And so there's a lot involved in that.
Are disputes involved, like brother one versus brother two?
Oh, absolutely.
No, Mom always wanted to leave that to me.
Absolutely, especially with the divorce rate as high as it is, and the blended families. There's a lot of that, and so a lot of people, because probate can be so time-consuming, a lot of people, as they are preparing their estate plan for the first time or updating their documents, are actually choosing to go with a revocable living trust. And the revocable living trust can take the place of a last will and testament. It has a lot more advantages. It's more of an up-to-date version of a last will and testament. So because of those advantages, it makes settling an estate a lot quicker and a lot easier. But it doesn't mean that just because you have a last will and testament and you have a living trust, a last will and testament or a living trust, that the living trust is there's not a little bit more involved. There is some things involved, and like we were talking about with people who actually have an estate plan, but they fail in some way. A living trust, there are some things that you have to do. You have to fund the trust, and you have to change those assets into the name of the trust. That's what keeps you from going through probate. So if you want to avoid probate, then you have to take the steps to be able to avoid probate. There's not one step that's going to make things easy. It's multiple steps that will make settling an estate easy for a family member.
And the more assets you have, the more complicated it is, and the more stuff you have to do.
Absolutely.
One of the very few advantages of being poor.
Yes, probably so. However, an estate plan also includes not only in the event that you were to pass away, but if you became incapacitated. And so part of an estate plan is having a power of attorney, so someone can make decisions for you financially and personally. It also includes having a medical power of attorney, so someone that can make your medical decisions for you, and then a living will, so someone will know what your wants are and your wishes are as far as end of life and what your idea of quality of life is. So in an estate plan, it looks at what happens in the event that you die, but also what happens in the event that you were alive that you can't make your own decisions. So the thing is how much control do you want to leave the people that are going to be making these decisions for you? Because without the legal documents, they don't have any control. And so the state takes control of your decisions until family members petition the courts for guardianship of you, and then they can make the decisions. So now, after everything that someone may have had to go through as far as taking care of a loved one, now they are having to hire attorneys and go to court just to be able to make the legal decisions for another person. So married couples don't automatically get to make decisions for each other. No, they absolutely don't. So they have to legally be appointed to make decisions as far as these estate planning issues.
I thought that was automatic.
No, it's not. And what also a lot of people don't realize is that once your children turn 18 years old, so if you have a child or you have a grandchild, you're going off to college, if you don't have a power of attorney or a medical power of attorney for them, or they don't have them so that their parents can make decisions, then exactly the same thing happens. The courts get involved. So estate planning is for all ages. It's not just for the elderly. It's not just for people who are facing death. It's for people to protect no matter what.
Wow. I mean, I could see conflicts coming up right then and there between let's say, a second wife and the original, and children from the original marriage about.
Absolutely.
You know, one says pull the plug and the other one says don't pull the plug, you know. And
exactly. And if you don't, and that's why I say, you know, put your thoughts in writing. What is your idea of quality of life? What do you want? Because those conversations that you have with your families are remembered very differently when faced with the issue. And so one person's idea of quality of life is not the same for another family member. So what you don't want to happen is for after you pass away or a family member passes away, then people aren't speaking.
Oh gosh.
And you've got those problems, and that happens so often. So, you know, the question, once again, when you're doing your estate planning, what do you want for your family? How do you want to be remembered? What legacy do you want to leave? And you can be in control of that, but not if you don't communicate it.
Communication is the big word in all of this.
It is.
Verbal and written. You mentioned a revocable living trust before. I'm not sure I know what that is. Explain what that is exactly, revocable living trust.
Well, a revocable living trust, there are two main types of trust. There's a revocable, which basically means that you can change it. You have the right to revoke or amend it. And then there are irrevocable trusts. Very different, a whole different, a ball of wax, a whole different animal. But a revocable living trust is it's an entity, it's an artificial entity, just like very similar to a corporation or an LLC or a partnership. A living trust actually can own your assets, and if you have a living trust, the probate courts don't have anything to do with assets that are owned by an entity. They have everything to do with what a person owns. And so if you want to avoid the probate process, then you can draw up a revocable living trust. You own that trust, so you make all of the decisions, and it has the same decisions that you're going to have in your last will and testament. But you can make those decisions. You are the trustee, so that you manage it on a daily basis, or in the event that you become incapacitated, someone else can manage your affairs for you. But in the event that you died, as far as the courts are concerned, if you have transferred your assets into the name of this living trust, as far as the courts are concerned, you died not owning anything. So if you die not owning anything, there's really nothing to probate. And so that's the reason why people are moving toward putting their assets into a revocable living trust. You can change it. You can be in control of it. But if you fund it properly and you connect all the dots to your assets, then settling the estate can be a much quicker process than going through probate and the court supervising all of the assets, because there's a certain period of time that it takes to get through probate. It can be anywhere from 6 months, 9 months to a year, and it also depends on how organized your executor is and whether or not they've got the time to settle the estate. Sometimes it could take years to settle an estate. So the simpler your family can make it, the better, or your loved one can make it. So a living trust helps with that. It doesn't make everything perfect, but it will speed up the process of settling an estate.
It shortens the agony quite a bit. Why does it take as long as a year? Is it just because the court looks at it, then puts it aside for a month and looks at it again, or is there ongoing work by people?
Well, when you have probate, it gives everything sort of has to stop for a little bit to make sure that this is the last will that was written. Is there another one that's going to come in? Maybe they find one in a closet somewhere. Creditors need to get paid, so we've got to make announcements to let people know that someone has passed away. You've got taxes that may have to be paid, and so there are a lot of things that come into play that the probate court wants to make sure that everything is done properly.
I see. We've got, I guess, about 5 minutes left to go here. Is there anything that we need to cover that we haven't covered so far, Becky?
I don't know. It sounds like we've covered a lot of stuff in this.
We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We've covered a lot of ground.
We've been loping along.
We have been. I think the three things that of kind of my advice to family members would be, the first one is to communicate and to document. And to organize.
Communicate, document, and organize.
I think those are the three things that I think if we leave today, if everyone will walk away with that, if you can organize organize everything so that your family can find it. You know what you have. Everything is updated. Document it legally, and then tell your family how you feel and what you want for them in the event that you're not here.
Right. You should write a book with the title something like Preparing for the Inevitable. That might be a good title. And as part of the book, you ought to have this very kind of a checklist where people can list their assets and where it should go and organize documents. And this is something that everybody fills out in your book, and they keep your book on the bookshelf.
Well, I think that's a great idea.
Is that a great idea?
I actually have, we have that, and if anyone that is listening today would like to have a copy of that,
wow.
They can look us up, Network Legal, www.networklegal.com, and
right.
we will give them a copy of our organizational form and let them do that themselves, and hopefully they'll get on the track of being prepared.
That's just great. I mean, anything that helps get over that psychological hurdle for the older person to be willing to face the inevitable and put all this stuff down and give his or her wishes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, I will say, you keep talking about this, the older person that doesn't want to talk about this. A lot of times the older person does, but the kids don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
So getting them together, the kids will go, oh no, I don't want to talk about that. Christmas time rolls around and no, I don't want to talk about that. So I have lots of older clients that are saying, you know what, I'm telling them, I want to talk about this. Let's go around the house and find out what you want. Sometimes it's the kids that don't want to go there. So
isn't it interesting?
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't initially have thought so, but now that I think about, I mean, nobody likes to face death, even somebody else's death.
Right.
You know, it's the inevitability of it, I guess. Yeah, it's interesting. Learned a lot of interesting things, not just about law here.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I might, next time I come on here, maybe I'll have a book to show you.
There you go. You don't have to give me any of the royalties. It's all right. The idea is free.
All right, thanks.
There's a lot of governmental involvement in this area. You mentioned, of course, through the judicial system. Excuse me. I'm just wondering, apart from the obvious problem of unethical legal practitioners and that sort of thing, which there are already methods for dealing with them, do you think that there's anything that the state or federal government needs to do in the area of regulation of this whole process or supervision? Actually, we just got about a half a minute to go, so it'll have to be a nutshell of an idea.
Yeah, I don't, you know what?
What's missing? Is there anything missing?
Well, I think the biggest thing that maybe you're referring to is online wills and online advice that people really can't confirm. And, we've got a lot of great attorneys in town that I don't think the ethical issue comes into play, but so many people want to do this themselves. They want to save money. All you see is online wills, and you really can't verify how old that site might be, who's actually doing all of that.
Got to stop you right there.
Okay.
That's the end of our nutshell. This has been Aging with Attitude, and our very informative guest has been Becky Keenan, founder and president of Network Legal, Inc. We air the second and third Saturday evening of the month at 8:30, and you take care of yourself.